sitting here with Leah Lyric Jackson. We like to say, we just got a new name for her actually, coined by Felicia Sherrill. We're gonna call her Leah Lyric. Leah Lyric, which of course she says that because she's an alliteration kind of person. We understand. All right, so earlier today I introduced Leah Lyric as a creative, and we learned from your bio and from your expression that you are very much so a creative. And I'm wondering about, oh, we learned one more thing. We learned that you haven't done any performances for the last 5 years. You've been tending to family. And this question is really about centering yourself in that, right? So you shared a lot of stuff with us today. We know that you're a parent of adult children. Okay, so adult sons. And we know that your father transitioned, right? We know that you are being a caretaker. There's a lot of things for a creative for any person to hold in at one time. So I want to ask you, what about your writing has been helping you to transverse that space?
Thank you for that question. As a writer, or as I think as a creative, but I consider myself a writer, do a lot of different types of writing. A lot of ideas swim around in your head. A lot of songs or words or phrases swimming around in your head all the time. And when life be lifing, as they say, you are sometimes required to compartmentalize. And unfortunately for creative, especially one who works with words, they don't stop. They don't want to be put in compartments. And how that has worked for me is, or how that has helped me in terms of the creative process, I have started using other forms of my creative self that I had no idea. So out of the pandemic, my father transitioned at the end of 2019, so it was right before we got knee deep into the pandemic. And then I was also an Iyawo, which in the Yoruba tradition, or in Santeria, if anybody's familiar, that is when you go through an initiation process that lasts for a year and 7 days. And you're basically sequestered without communication, really interaction with other people, for a lot of reasons. Mostly you become a baby again. And so I was a Yawo. My father transitioned, and the world shut down. And during that time, I had no idea what was going on in my brain, but I was like, I can't write. So I started sewing with my hands. I don't use a machine. I got a B+ in home economics in 7th grade, so I'm not exactly the best when it comes to threading the bobbin, but I started sewing, and I started taking apart a lot of the things that some of my father's clothing, his clothing that my aunt had brought back from Nigeria, and I started sewing pillows for my family members as ways to, just to share a piece of him with them. And then people started giving me material because they knew I was sewing, so I'm sewing. I called myself, I was Betsy Brawson. And then I started making jewelry. I've never made jewelry before in my life. I've never beaded, anything like that. And here I am utilizing some parts of my creative, doing poetry with my hands, which I had no idea that I had to do that. And coming full circle, how does writing, or how does my creative part, how has that been helping me through this process? I think it's keeping me very sane. It's keeping me focused on why this is a gift and why it should be shared, and why it should be shared not just in a community like this, but also in everyday language. So words are very important to me, the knowledge of understanding of words, but also the fact that now we have these banned words, which, trust me, I'm writing a piece about those 241 words, or I keep changing the number. 245 words, I think it is, banned words. So that's what's been helping it with me with this transition into the next part of my lifespan. I'm also a therapist, so I use words and language like lifespan. Is that I have to get it from here down to help keep my brain sane, my brain sane. And that's what I've been utilizing. But also, I've been very grateful that God has allowed me to find other ways to create poetry or create art, and sharing those things. So, soulful stitching, everything that comes, it's like I put a lot of love and patience into it. And then I said, I'll start, hey, somebody wants me to sew something for them, I'll start doing that for them. And people start asking me to make pillows. And I'm like, this is something that I never thought could be a part of, who I am as a creative. So that's been an evolution during this time. But yes, I'm ready to get back on the microphone.
Yes, ma'am. Look, whatever comes out is right. So that was actually going to be my next question. Are you ready? First of all, thank you for letting us be first and letting Mercy Inc. be the place where you reemerge, right?
I've been watching what you've been doing. Well, let me so the conversation, I feel like, should we use the microphone? Is that better if we use the microphone?
It's better, yes, it's better.
Oh, recording, oh, okay, great, sorry about that. So, as I was saying, Talena, was that I've been watching Word Seating, and I've been watching what you've been doing over that period of time, because you really started to, I think, branch out, and then I think as your role became more prominent as the poet laureate, you started to interact with folks that I've shared stage with and that are my friends in working in poetry and doing poetry. But I've been watching what you've been doing, and I wanted to put my energy in a place that I knew respected. This is as a craft and as a community, and also as a foundation of strength, because what you share and how you present to the community is something that we can trust and feel safe and feel secure in. So it's my privilege and pleasure to be a featured artist, and being back on the scene, as it were, as a part of anything that you have created, or part of your community has created here in Patterson. And I'm just very blessed that I crossed paths with you. Happy.
You are hired.
Definitely, you got the job.
Just hired her.
Yes.
You're hired. I wrote that script for her earlier today. But thank you very much. I really appreciate you. And I just made a joke about it because I was feeling tearful. That was my coping mechanism to not let my orbital lobes malfunction. So you also talked about in your poems, more than one poem, rhythm. And you opened up with a poem that was the beat, the drum, the beat, the beat, the beat, the beat, the beat, the beat, and it was really lyrical. It was really incredible. And you have, you've done that in more than one space. And let's talk about that first, and then I have more, okay? Tell me about that.
So I wrote that poem in 1990, something, 97, 97. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, it was a Tony Award-winning Broadway play. Savion Glover, who's New Jersey's own, Savion Glover created the artistic, and also my mentor, my friend Reggie Gaines, wrote the libretto, or wrote the poems and the poetry that is a part of the performance. Anyone familiar with Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk? Okay, it's tap dancing, poetry, rap. At any rate, there's a lot of understanding of how we as artists, or how we as humans have been able, especially Africans that have been in the diaspora, how we've been able to communicate with one another without knowing and having the same language. How those of us who were taken from places that seem so far away, and I can meet someone that is from Brazil or someone who is from China that looks like me and you, and their understanding or their language, there's something in the cadence, there's something in the spirit, there's something in the DNA, and I wanted to convey that, and I think Noise Funk really spoke to that in terms of tap dancing being an integral part because it's from the boot dance in South Africa, and there's so many different other dance forms that originate really with Africans and that have been in the diaspora, because we've kept our lineage, we've kept our history through the drum, and the drum being a part of how people communicated without verbal communication. So if those of you who are not familiar with history in terms of how we got all over the world, people that look like, us, is that drums signified so many different things. So if you don't know the story of the liberation of Haiti, this is, we're coming up on the 400 year. This year is we celebrate the 400 year liberation of Haiti. About young people, so I'm always like, is your friend now? They were called to come together to liberate themselves, self-liberation through drums. There is a rhythm, there is the drum beat. Is very important because you could feel that. You don't have to be a poet to feel that drum beat because we all have a heartbeat. We all have a heartbeat. And so therefore, that means that we are all connected, period. And I am very conscious of that, especially as I wrote it. But I'm going to tell you, I was pretty much, people only like to use the word possessed. But when I wrote that piece, it came to me as a possession. I was not writing it down. I actually, back in the day, there was a thing called tape recorders. Tape recorders. You had to press play, you had to press record, both at the same time. Just saying. Ancient technology. So I had a tape recorder, and I was in my college dorm, and because song was coming. Press record, and I just started spitting. So everything that you heard, everything that is written down now, I didn't write it. I wrote it, but I didn't write it. It wrote me, pretty much. It wrote me. So that was how it came about. It was the ancestors, it was the people, I call them the people. They wanted me to say what I had to say, and I'm so grateful that I'm still able to move people with that poem, and that people are still moved by that poem. And to remember that we all are humans, we all have a heartbeat, so therefore the drum is inside of us, period. Because if you ever listen to your heartbeat, you know that there's a rhythm there. So that's how we're all connected. Don't ever forget that.
That's a good place to clap right there. All right, so that's one through line in your work was that rhythm and that drum. So we appreciate you, and I saw you relive that moment of recording it with your foot tapping. So I really appreciate that visceral response that you have to your poetry. There's another thing that the other through line of many is your Blackness and your motherhood. And I would like you to talk about the intersection of Blackness and motherhood, especially as it pertains to being the mother of Black sons.
Thank you. That's a very loaded question for me. When I say loaded, I mean I could talk all day long. My sons made me the woman that I became. I became a mother at 25 years old, and although 25 doesn't seem to be young for me and my experience, I was young. I ain't know nothing about birth, no babies. Okay, that's a quote from Gone from the Wind. Gone with the Wind. If you don't know Butterfly McQueen, I'm just gonna say these names so that y'all just go, oh, that lady said something that day. My blackness. So this is interesting because I identify as a black woman. I identify as a black woman. However, I am multiracial or multi-ethnic. No, I'm not multiracial, only one race. I'm multi-ethnic. And I was raised in a household that so I was raised by a very learned, genius level black father. My father was he was a major part of my life, and so my blackness came up from, I grew up having African art around us. I call it the Jackson satellite of the Smithsonian African American Museum of Art, because I grew up around books and artwork and art, and anyone who came through my home, and one of my best friends that we've been friends since 6th grade, she could tell you, you would get a black history lesson if you came into Jack, in a book, and probably pencils and pens as well. And I digress. So, the political is personal and the personal is political. For me, when I write poetry, or the poetry that I really, stand by, because I write all types of poetry, but the poetry that means so much to me, and I'm very forceful with, is that really punctuates, and blackness is a state of mind. It's not necessary, it's not an ethnicity, it's a state of mind. And therefore, as I was being raised by this very strong father and a strong mother as well, in her own right, this emphasis on being very proud to be a black person, a black woman, or a black person, I would say, but definitely a black woman was first and foremost in my upbringing. So I was never afraid. In fact, in high school, you co-sign if you remember this, but they used to call me Mrs. Malcolm X in high school. I didn't care if they were making fun of me. I wore it proudly. That's right. More power, all power to the people. Then I became a mother. Oh boy. Niken Nechem Avmater. That is my son, my eldest son's name. It transformed me in a way that my mother said, "You're never going to sleep the same way again." And I didn't understand what she meant until I had my son. And he became everybody's baby. But he was diagnosed with autism when he was 4. And I said, we got the diagnosis because it is a family thing. And he raised me. He allowed me to make mistakes. He allowed me to stumble and fall and learn with him, especially being a new mom, and then at that time, autism didn't have as much awareness in the community as it does now, which I'm very grateful for, and definitely had a part in that. But as black mothers, we didn't have the support groups and the support advocacy that we have now, which is really grateful. So here I am, and I wasn't a single mom. His father was a part of his life and a part of my life. However, motherhood became a real big badge of honor for me. It allowed me to slow down because in all of my blackness, I was, all over the place. I was, running here and running there, and I was part of this organization. I was doing this, and the New Eurekan, as you heard, I was a New Eurekan Slam, New Eurekan Poetry Grand Slam semi-finalist. I was on my way to doing deaf poetry and everything, and then God said, nope, you got a job to do. And then I became a mother again of another black boy after saying, okay, maybe I'll get the girl, maybe I'll get the girl. And I say this, and I wish they both were here. My youngest son was supposed to be here performing with me. He waited to the last minute to do some work. He's in his second semester at Essex County. And so he's like, oh, I have these 2 bibliographies I have to do, I can't come. But when I had my second son, I said, oh, wait a minute, what is my role? So this is what being a mother taught me, to respect men in a great deal, in a different way than I had previously. I, as a black woman, not saying that I didn't respect men, but I just thought highly of women, let's just say, a little more highly of women. I'm different now. I understand that you have cognitive abilities and you have emotions and you have mood swings and, you know, credit my